Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a big thank you to Kurt Metz for sharing with us some of his awesome Warhammer 40k artwork. Kurt actually did all the channel art for the Mordian Glory YouTube channel, and he's really awesome and I love all of his work. You can actually find a link down to his DeviantArt in every single one of these videos, so please go and check that out. It's really cool stuff. And if you're interested in getting some Warhammer 40k art, please reach out to Kurt because he does a really good job. So thank you, Kurt, for this. And of course, if anyone, as usual, if anyone else has got any cool artwork or pictures of their armies that they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page or leave a comment down below. And of course, I will check them out. But without further ado, let's get into today's video. Now in today's video, I want to take a look at the update to the secondary objective, whilst we stand, we fight. Now I didn't cover this in my previous two videos because, well, firstly, I'll be honest with you, I missed it, and then I could have redone the video for uploading it, but I thought this is actually such a significant change, and I think it's been overlooked by a lot of the Warhammer community so far. But it's a really significant change to how I believe Warhammer 40k is going to change, and I think there is a potential, and I have been known to be wrong, but I think there is potential for this to massively affect the meta, and therefore I've decided to give it its own separate video. Now, for those of you that don't know how the objective whilst we stand, we fight used to work, how it was originally written in the core rulebook, essentially you took your three most expensive models, these typically were expensive characters or monsters, and you said, right, and you had to pick your most expensive ones, and essentially the top three, if they were alive at the end of the game, you got 5 points for each one of them. So if you kept all three alive, you got 15 points. If you kept two of them alive, you got 10 points. And if you kept one of them alive, you got 5 points. And if you had none of them alive, then you got 0 points for that secondary objective. So it was quite an interesting one because you actually started at the beginning of the game with 15 points almost, and it was up to your opponent to take those off you. It wasn't like a lot of the objectives, which is you get points for killing stuff or for progressively throughout the mission. Now, at first, a lot of people looked at the objective and they thought it's a bit poo. Now, and then I did a video actually analysing it and saying this is a really strong one for Imperial Guard, especially for infantry Imperial Guard, because in an infantry army, your most expensive models tend to be your characters, like, for example, your Lord Commissars, and they would actually be really easy for you to screen. You don't need your Lord Commissars up front. Typically in a pure infantry guard army, they would stay back because they were just HQ fillers after your three company commanders were taken. So it was actually a really good secondary objective for pure infantry guard. It has now changed fundamentally. So that's what it was, and now it has changed fundamentally from models to units. Okay, so now you take the three most expensive units, and as long as they are alive at the end of the game, then you will get 15 points. Now let's firstly look at this from a guard perspective. The pros and cons. Is it a good thing, or actually overall is it a bad thing? And then let's look at it in the wider context of 9th edition and all the factions. So on the surface, let's start on the surface. Basically, for a pure infantry army, this doesn't look good because now, if you take a Lord Commissar and you give him all the expensive upgrades you can give him, he's only going to be 50 points, which means even a basic infantry squad will be more expensive than him. So essentially, guys, this objective is no longer really viable for the old tactic of how it was being used. So it's essentially a dead strategy for pure infantry guard. Now, it does open up some options for mixed guard or for sort of more combat heavy guard. So one of the couple of things that I've seen bandied around is if you can use this on a big squad of Bullgrins. Okay, because Bullgrins, if you're going to take a big block of 9, which most competitive guard armies are running at least one block of Bulgarians, and it's starting to, you know, as people are putting the models together and painting them up, it's starting to look like a lot of competitive guard armies are turning up with 2 of these things. And then when you think about this in the context of Bulgarians have gone down in points, so they're still your most expensive unit, but they are not taking up as many points, even with the reduction. It's a win-win. You're getting the most expensive unit for Warrington we fight, whilst also saving points on it, so it's really good. There's also talk about using Lehman Russes. So the new wording of the rule specifically states if a unit starts off as one thing, but then during the course of the battle splits into multiple small units, like combat squadding marines or drones flying off transports, then all members of the unit need to be killed. Now, Lehman Russes can be taken in squadrons. So you take 3 tanks. They start off as one unit, and then at the beginning of the game they split off. Now that still counts, from what I understand. Until the FAQ, that still counts. So you could take a squadron of 3 Valkyries. You could take a squadron of 3 Lehman Russes, or 3 Sentinels. It doesn't really matter. You could take a squadron, 3 Hellhounds even. You can take a squadron of these things, and until the enemy kills all 3 of them, you're rosy. So if you take a big squadron of Lehman Russes, even if you took them bare bones, your opponent's going to have to kill all 3 Russes in that squadron to get the 5 points, which is interesting, right? Now, on the surface, this looks like, whilst it might be a death blow for pure infantry guard, it could be a boost for regular guard and for other guard armies out there. So, but when you dig a little bit further, the cracks start appearing, guys. Okay, now this is not me being a negative Nancy. I've just scraped below the surface. I've tried to sort of look at it from a positive point of view, but also I'm trying to give a balanced point of view, which is, well, firstly, 3 Lehman Russes, basic Lehman Russes, well, just basically, not even 3 of them, just basic Lehman Russes in general aren't very good. They're not very good at all. So even if you take 3 of them and you're thinking, well, I don't really care if they kill anything, they will, they'll score me 5 points. It's like, okay, yes, but you're spending 480 points on one unit in an attempt to score 5 victory points. It's not really a great return on investment. Now, even if you do that 3 times, to max out that particular secondary, that's 1,500 points for your army, roughly. That doesn't leave you a lot else. And unfortunately, what that means is that the enemy will be killing your Russes, because that's what they want to do anyway. And every Russ, if the enemy takes thin their ranks and bring it down, and then something else, and you've got while we fight on one of these squadrons of Russes, what it means is for every Russ they kill, they're going to get 3 points, because they'll get 2 for bring it down and 1 for thin their ranks, because they still stack. And if they kill a squadron, the enemy will have earned themselves 9 points, and at the same time denied you 5 points. So by killing 3 Russes, there will be a 14-point swing in favour of the enemy. Which is, it's not that hard to kill 3 Russes. So it's a tough feat. So you could build your list this way, but I don't think you're going to do a huge amount of damage. You're taking these, you're having to take these with blast weapons, so they can all be bad touched. They can't really shoot into combat. Do I think that the enemy will be able to kill all 9 Russes? No, I don't. I'll be honest with you. Your worst case scenario, you will still more than likely have 1 squadron of Russes left. Okay, I think you could definitely play it to your strengths, where you may have 4 Russes left between 2 units. I think that's likely. So I think you could definitely score 10 points off this, but I think you would probably lose the game anyway, because I think if you're relying on that many Leman Russes, it's going to start affecting the way you play. I mean, you won't be able to kill very much. Look, if 9 Leman Russes was good, it would already be being taken. This would have just been a buff for a particular list. Best way of putting it without me waffling on. Now, the other route you could go is you could go down the Mass Bulgrin route. That is interesting, but the problem with Bulgrins is it puts them in a funny position. What makes Bulgrins so good now is they are a victory point surplus unit. So what that means is they don't give away any victory points. Even a full squad of them isn't going to give away anything. They won't even give away a single thin their ranks point. That's what makes them so good in 9th edition, because it's the age of elite infantry. And they are very elite infantry. They're great, so you can throw them at the enemy and speed bump and do incredible damage at the same time and just be really a pain in the butt. And at the same time, your opponent gains nothing out of killing them. Zero. There's no incentive for your opponent to kill those Bulgrins apart from to try and stop you from hurting them. That's what makes Bulgrins so good. But if you then start taking them in big blobs and taking while we stand we fight on them, you then put them in a funny position because you want them to be getting involved. You want them to be punching the enemy and being feisty. And my Bulgrins, they tend to die every single game, but they do a really good job of dying. They're sort of quintessential guard unit. They die on my terms. If I have to start worrying about them dying, it's going to really impact the way I play with them. It's just not going to work. So, because I'm going to want to use them, but not risk them. That's the problem with the way they've changed this. From a guard perspective, I think I think Bulgrins are pretty tough, and they're slow, but they're slow. That's the thing, which means the enemy Bulgrins nearly always 50-50. At the best case scenario, 50-50 Bulgrins get charged or are charged. The definition of a good assault unit is one that can, get the jump on the enemy. I mean, if you look at a big block of Bulgrins and then put them up against a block of Sanguinary Guard, for example, I mean, I don't even know the latest rules for Sanguinary Guard. All I know is they get an absolutely shocking amount of attacks. Now, the Sanguinary Guard, I think they get 5 attacks each. You're looking at 50 attacks. They're in Assault Doctrine, they're AP 4, so even if you've got invulnerable saves, you're on a 4 for invulnerable save. I believe they're Strength 5 with their swords or axes now, so they will be at least wounding on 3s. I know they used to have a stratagem, and I think they still do a stratagem, or their weapons have been updated, where they used to be a flat damage 2. They've got a flat damage, basically. Long story short, if those Sanguinary Guard get the jump on you, they're going to do some serious damage to those Bulgrins. They're going to get 50. I mean, they'll probably have some form of reroll. The Bulgrins are going to be. You're going to have 50 attacks. Like I said, they'll probably, at the very least, well, with rerolls, you're looking about 30, I'd say 40 hits, and the wounding on 3s. So you're looking at about 20 odd wounds. I mean, I'm very, very roughing this. Point is 20 odd wounds. Let's be harsh. Let's say 25 wounds, 24 wounds. Half go through. 12 wounds go through. Each one of those kills. Each pair of those should kill a Bulgrin. So you're looking at 6 out of 9 Bulgrins wiped in one go, from pretty much equivalent points in Sanguinary Guard. So yeah, it's not. And yeah, so you want to be able to, you want that to happen and for you not to care, because then what's happened is the Sanguinary Guard have jumped in a bunch of Bulgrins and really, given them the beans, but then your Guard army turns around and clears those Sanguinary Guard off. That's what you want them to do. If you take while we stand we fight on Bulgrins, what you're there then doing is panicking because your Bulgrins have died and they could be very close to giving away victory points, or denying yourself victory points, because you don't want to risk them. So when you start scratching on the surface, I don't think this is a good objective for Gad. I think you can play to it. I think there's some ways of making it work. So you could start looking at things like Commissar Yarrick. If you're Katachan, you could take Strachan. Things like that I think could work. But the problem is, guys, no matter how you kind of get around it, this is not an. I would say this is not an improved. No matter how you get around it, you're now having to spend more victory points, more list points, army points on securing this objective. So what do I mean by that? This is the summary of the GAR perspective. You used to be able to guarantee yourself, if this objective, for 150 points. You took 3 Lord Commissars. I mean, this is maximum. We took 3 Lord Commissars and gave them a Power Fist and a Plasma Pistol Leech. And you took that in a Pure Infantry Guard army, which was the most competitive form of Imperial Guard. We're talking about from a competitive point of view. We're not talking about a take-all-comers guard list here. We're talking about a Pure Infantry competitive Guard army that won the Middle Brawl and the primaries and only gave away within the ranks and nothing else, pretty much. You used to be able to guarantee yourself 15 well-standing fight points, and you used to do that in a competitive Guard list for 150 army points. It was a bargain. I did a video on this. It's now out of date, but I did a video on this. Now, to do the same thing in a Pure Infantry army, you'll have to take Strachan, you'll have to take Yarrick, and another expensive character. I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, maybe Creed, but I don't even think he's that expensive. I think he's only 60 points. Maybe a Ogre Bodyguard, maybe like someone like Nork Dead Dog. But the point is you're having to spend now between 250 and 300 points. So, worst case scenario, this objective is now twice as expensive. I mean, best case scenario, actually. Best case scenario, you're running a Pure Infantry Guard army. This objective is now twice as, just under or about twice as expensive in army points for you to achieve. So it's not a buff for Guard. Not in my opinion. I'm happy to be proven wrong. Please put down in the comment section below if you think, Mordian Glory, you crazy. You crazy, you haven't looked at this from all angles, and I'm more than willing to accept that. But I think going through the top 3 candidates for this thing, 4 or 5 candidates. I mean, Baneblade, very expensive, absolute useless model, especially considering what's happened with the points. Leaving Rust Squadron, great on the surface, but no damage output. I mean, they just don't. Basically, they just don't have a damage output. I know people keep going on about, but they've been made cheaper now. When Lehman Russes were 130 points for a basic Lehman Russ, which is 30 points less than they are now, people still didn't take them. Okay, so it doesn't matter how cheap you make them, they just don't have the damage output. They're not a good unit for damage output, and they're too fragile. Tank commanders are great. Tank commanders, good, but they are going to get targeted and they are going to get taken down very quickly. Can't squadron them. Bulgrins, like we said, it puts the unit in an awkward position. Conscripts, you could do it in a Pure Infantry army with 3 blobs of 20 conscripts, but 20 conscripts isn't that hard to kill. You could do it with 3 blobs of 30 conscripts, but then you have to spend 450 points. So either way, it's between 300 and 450 points, which means, again, in comparison to where we were before, you're spending a minimum of double to secure the same 15 victory points. Not good. That's not a buff. So from a Pure Infantry perspective, from an armour perspective, from a mixed, Bulgrins or take-all-comers unit perspective, I don't see this as a buff. I apologise if everyone got very excited and now we're all sort of, myself included, realising this is not a buff for Guard, but that seems to be the way. Apologies if this video is coming off as really salty. I'm trying to keep it level-headed so it doesn't come across as salty. So unfortunately, I don't think it's a good thing for the guard. Now, this has been a 20-minute video of me moaning about woe is me. This is all gone. It's all, gone tits up. Let's look at the wider meta for a second. Okay. I think the problem with this is that now affects units is there are certain armies out there which can take very, very expensive, hyper durable and really, really powerful deadly units. Way better than the guard possibly could. And one faction that jumps to mind for this is Custodies. I think that max size blobs of Custodies bikers are back on the menu. They've had a points reduction. They are very deadly. They've got incredible damage output because the whole army hits on 2s. So when your whole army hits on 2s, even with the way they've changed rerolls, it doesn't matter. The whole army hits on 2s. So they've got fantastic speed and board control, fantastic durability, invulnerable saves galore. They've got everything. Custodies are really, really powerful, and they've recently received a lot of buffs in chapter approved. In the latest points change, they can Hilarious Terminators were already a really sleeper unit at the end of 8th. They carried on through into 9th, and they are really powerful, and they can actually be split down. So your opponent has got a hyper durable unit which he can actually split into 2, which means he can hide half the unit or keep it as a backfield unit, and then if they start taking damage he can hide them out of range but still remain aggressive with the other half of the unit. So he's got the flexibility and the damage. It just works for him. Just works for him. So what I think we're going to see, guys, is a return of the Death Star. Now, I'm not talking Star Wars here. What the Death Star was, for those of you that didn't play 6th and 7th edition, Death Star was a term that came about for a type of army or a type of list that had one insane unit. You had things like Beast Star, Wolf Star, Farsight Bomb, essentially the same thing, Farsight Bomb, Screamer Star, which were essentially these just insane, these armies that were really, really small, really, really elite and impossible to kill. And I think we're going to see a return to that. Screamer Star, for example, was a 2+ rerollable invulnerable save. Now, we don't quite have that ridiculousness yet in 9th edition, but we're early days yet, and ever since, and I know I bang on about this all the time, but ever since Vigilus dropped, it has been a slippery slope and a relentless march back towards the dark days of 7th. And 9th edition and what we've seen so far is doing nothing to dissuade me of that being the current course. So I think we will see a return of the Death Star. I think you're going to see a return of massive, massive units which are really durable, which will just absolutely smash everything in front of them and be almost impossible to kill. And I think that's what we're going to see. Things like massive blocks of Thunderwolf cavalry may make a return. Now, the way the character rules is a bit different. One of the things that used to make Death Stars really effective was the ability to join characters onto units. But now we have aura buffs. So again, if you look at this in terms of Custodies, they want to take these big units of bikes. They've had a discount. Those bikes are going to score them 15 points if they're still alive by the end of the game. If those bikes start taking a lot of hits, they've got the movement to just get out of there and so hide them. Their banner people, the Vexilla Praetors, which can give all the bikes a -1 to hit, are now only 50 points. Massive reduction. I believe that's a half price reduction, or at least a 30 to 50 point reduction on what they were. So Custodies are really set up to be the quintessential Death Star army. I think they're going to be in a really, really strong place. They were already doing very, very well. Now, also coming out of this, I know some of you say, "Oh, Mordian Glory, you're just focusing on one faction." We've got the current Death Guard coming out. Now, can you imagine how difficult it's going to be to shift a big block of 20 of the new Death Guard? It's already been mass hammered to death that it actually turns out the new Death Guard are way more durable than the old Death Guard, and shifting 20 Plague Marines was already a very difficult task. It's now got, I believe on the math hammer, they're about 20% more durable overall against small arms and big arms. So what we're going to see here, guys, is what I've been banging on about since the beginning of 9th, which is it is the addition of durability. He who is most durable will win the games. It's what we're seeing with demons, it's what we're seeing with Custodies, it's what we're seeing with Death Guard, it's what we're seeing with Marines. You know, this is the age of mega elite infantry, and this change to how to whilst we stand we fight is only going to encourage that. Who knows? We'll check back in a few months and we'll see if that's still the case, but that is my prediction. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I know this was a bit more of a serious one, less jokey, but that was kind of the intention. I wanted to do a serious analysis of this. It was not intended to be salty or moany or anything like that. I was keeping it super even keel. So that's probably going to be the kind of it for the analysis of the FAQ and points for now. Any major changes that come out, obviously, we'll cover them. But without further ado, let's wrap the video up there. As always, guys, please give me as much feedback as possible. I'm really interested to know your take on this. And of course, I'll see you guys next time.